95% of Americans, by the time they reach age 65, after a lifetime of work, cannot support themselves. They are either broke or dependent on government or living off their family. 5% retire with money. 95% don't. And the richest country in human history is the country where this is true. So here's the question Tony Robbins spent years trying to answer. What is the 5% doing that the 95% isn't? It isn't luck. It isn't talent. It isn't even hard work. The answer is 5 specific things in a specific order, and almost nobody is ever taught them. Welcome to part 2 of our deep dive into Awaken the Giant Within. If you haven't seen part 1, it covered the inner half of Tony Robbins' system, your emotions, your body, the people you love. This part covers the outer half, the part that deals with the world you build with your hands, your money, your time, the code you live by, and at the very end, the thing one person, just one person, actually has the power to do in the world. Over the next 50 minutes, I'll walk you through it. Now I want to say something honest about this part of the book before we go any further. Tony Robbins wrote it in 1991. The financial section has some examples: credit card debt totals, oil reserve numbers, references to companies that no longer exist, that are obviously of their time. I'll modernize where it helps, but the underlying ideas are the kind of thing that doesn't age. The math of compounding doesn't change. The psychology of scarcity doesn't change. The reason most people are bad with money has the same root today as it did in 1991, in 1891, and probably in ancient Rome. What you're about to hear is, in my opinion, the most underrated half of the entire book. The financial chapter alone, if you actually applied it, would change the trajectory of your next decade. The chapter on your personal code of conduct contains a story about Benjamin Franklin that I genuinely think every adult should hear at least once in their life. The chapter on time has a single distinction in it that most productivity experts have never even named. And the closing of the book, the chapter on what one person can do, contains a story so wild, so improbable, and so completely true that I had to read it twice to make sure I was understanding it right. All of it starts with one uncomfortable truth about why most people stay broke, and it has almost nothing to do with how much they earn. The real reason most people stay broke. Let me ask you something. If a brilliant idea came to you tomorrow, a clear, viable, achievable plan that, if you executed it well, would make you wealthy over the next 10 years, would you actually do it? Most people asked that question immediately say yes. Of course I would. Who wouldn't? But here is what Robbins says is true, and what nearly every honest financial coach you'll ever meet has had to learn the hard way. Most people, if that plan landed in their lap tomorrow, would not actually do it. They would find reasons not to. The timing isn't right. They need to learn more first. They need to wait until the kids are out of the house. They need to wait until the economy stabilizes. They need to think about it. They need to talk to their spouse. They need to talk to a friend. They need to read another book. A year would pass. The plan would still be sitting there, unexecuted, and they would still be broke. Why? Robbins says the reason has nothing to do with information and almost nothing to do with capability. The reason is that most people deep down have a complicated and contradictory relationship with money itself. Their conscious mind says, I want more money. Their unconscious mind says, but money is dirty, or wealthy people are bad, or if I had more money, my relationships would change, or I don't deserve it, or what would my family think? And when the conscious mind wants one thing and the unconscious mind wants another, the unconscious mind always wins, quietly, without you noticing. The opportunity comes and you find a reason to walk past it. The investment looks promising and you wait too long. The raise is on the table and you don't ask for it. Robbins says it again and again throughout the book. The single biggest reason most people don't become financially successful is not a lack of information. It's that they're sending their nervous system two opposite signals about money. every single day, and the nervous system just freezes. So before we talk about how to make money, we need to look at the quiet beliefs that may be running underneath all of it. Here is the first one, and it's the one Robbins says is most universal. It's the belief in scarcity, the deep, almost unconscious assumption that there is a finite pie, that if someone else got rich, they must have taken something away from someone else, that for one person to win, another person has to lose, that the resources of the world are limited and there isn't enough to go around. This belief, more than any other, is what keeps people from ever becoming wealthy. Because if you secretly believe that wealth is a zero-sum game, then becoming wealthy yourself means, on some level, taking from others, and almost nobody wants to feel like that. So you find quiet ways to sabotage your own progress. You undercharge for your work. You don't ask for the raise. You don't negotiate the salary. You give the discount nobody asked for. You apologize for the price of your product. Robbins says this belief is so common and so invisible that most people who hold it have no idea they hold it. So how do you know if you do? Here's a simple test. The next time you find out somebody you know just made a lot of money, got a big promotion, sold a business, landed an opportunity you didn't get, pay attention to the very first feeling that moves through you. Don't judge it, just notice it. If your first feeling is genuine joy for them, you probably don't hold the scarcity belief in any meaningful way. If your first feeling is a tight, hot pulse of something, envy, resentment, suspicion, the quiet thought of why them and not me, the quiet thought that they must have gotten lucky, the quiet thought that they probably stepped on people to get there, that's the scarcity belief leaking out the edges. And here is what Robbins says nobody talks about. If you feel that way when other people get rich, your own brain is taking notes. Your nervous system is recording the message. Having a lot of money makes you a target for that feeling. So I better not have a lot of money, because then everyone will feel that way about me. You can want money your whole life, and quietly, secretly, you can also be making sure you never have it, because some part of you doesn't want to become the thing you resent. Now there's a different way to look at all of this, and Robbins introduces it through one of the smartest economists of the last century, a friend of his named Paul Pilzer. Pilzer was a Wharton-trained economist who built his career on a single contrarian idea. He didn't believe in scarcity, at least not the way most economists talked about it. He believed in something he called economic alchemy, the idea that human ingenuity, applied over time, doesn't just discover new resources, it actually creates them. Sounds like word games, right? Let me give you the example Pilzer used, because it's one of those facts that once you hear it, you can never quite unhear. In 1973, the world was in an oil panic. People were sitting in gas lines for hours. The most sophisticated experts on the planet, using the best computer analysis available at the time, calculated that the world had approximately 700 billion barrels of oil left. At our then current rate of consumption, those experts said that supply would last about 35 to 40 years, which meant, by their math, that the world should have started running out of oil somewhere around the year 2010. Now here's the part you might not have heard. By 1988, just 15 years after the panic, the world had 30% more oil than it had in 1973. Not fewer reserves, more reserves, significantly more. And by the time you and I are having this conversation, the proven oil reserves in the world are several times what the 1973 experts said the entire planet contained. What happened? Two things. First, technology improved how much oil we could find. New discovery techniques opened up reserves nobody had known existed. Second, and more importantly, technology improved how efficiently we could use what we already had. The computerized fuel injector, invented in the late 1970s, cost about $25 and replaced a $300 carburetor, and it doubled the fuel efficiency of nearly every car on the road within a decade. Overnight, A gallon of gas was worth twice as much as it had been the day before, not because the gallon changed, but because the gallon could now move a car twice as far. The supply of oil didn't decrease as the experts had predicted. It effectively doubled, because human beings figured out how to do more with less. This is what pills are meant by alchemy. The medieval alchemists were the men who tried to turn lead into gold. They never figured it out, but in trying, they invented the science of chemistry, which produced more wealth than gold ever could have. Modern alchemy is the same idea. The most successful people of our time aren't people who took things away from others. They're people who took ordinary, low-value stuff. Sand becomes silicon, becomes computer chips. Information becomes a search engine. Garages become rideshare networks, and turned it into something the world hadn't had before. And once you really see this, your whole frame for money starts to shift. Wealth isn't a fixed pile that gets divided. Wealth is what happens when somebody creates something that didn't exist before. The pie isn't fixed. The pie can grow, and the people who make it grow are the people who get the largest slice, not because they took from others, but because they added something nobody else added. So if you carry in some quiet corner of your mind the suspicion that becoming wealthy means taking from someone else, I want you to consider, just consider, that this might be exactly backwards. Becoming wealthy the right way means giving more than you take, means creating more than you consume, means leaving the world slightly richer than you found it, in your own corner of it, with your own contribution. And the people who hold that belief with their whole chest are the people who eventually accumulate something, because they're not fighting themselves the whole time. All right, so if scarcity is the first belief that needs to come out, what's the second? The second is the belief that money is too complicated, that investing, finances, taxes, all of that is the domain of experts, and ordinary people should leave it alone. Robbins says this is one of the most expensive beliefs a person can hold. Not because the experts are wrong, many of them are very good, but because if you don't understand your own finances at a basic level, you have nobody to blame when things go wrong, and you have no agency when things go right. Robbins worked with people who had millions of dollars and felt poor, not because they didn't have money, they had money, but because they had no idea how their money worked. They had handed the whole machine over to someone else, their accountant, their financial advisor, their broker, and they spent their lives in a kind of low-grade financial anxiety because the most important machine in their life was running entirely without their understanding. You don't have to become a financial expert. You don't have to know everything, but you have to know enough to ask intelligent questions. You have to know what's happening with your money. You have to know, on a basic level, the difference between an asset and a liability, between simple and compound interest, between earning and investing, between income and wealth. If you don't, you'll always be at the mercy of someone who does. And here is the third belief, and Robbins says this one might be the most dangerous of all. It's the belief that someday, when you've made enough, you'll finally be free. This is the belief that drives people to work 80-hour weeks for 30 years. The belief that drives the perpetual postponement of life. The belief that says, I'll travel later, I'll spend time with the kids later, I'll relax later, I'll be happy later, after I make enough. And here's the thing nobody tells you about that belief. Later never comes, because the goalpost moves. You hit 100,000 a year, and suddenly your standard of living rises to meet it. You hit $250,000, and your expenses rise to meet that. You hit $1 million, and you find new things you need that someone earning 50,000 wouldn't have dreamed of needing. And the feeling of finally being able to relax, finally being able to breathe, never actually arrives, because every time you get to where you thought it would arrive, the destination has moved. Robbins says more than once that the people he works with at the highest income brackets, people earning $1 million or more a year, almost all of them feel broke. Not because they are broke, because their expenses have grown to match their income every step of the way, and they've never developed the muscle of living below their means. The freedom isn't waiting for you at some income level. The freedom is in the relationship you have with money right now, at whatever level you're at. If you can live below your means at $30,000 a year, you can live below your means at $300,000 a year. If you can't live below your means at $30,000, you won't be able to at $300,000. The income changes, the pattern doesn't. So those are the 3 beliefs Robbins says quietly run most people's financial lives. Scarcity, the belief that money is a zero-sum game. Complexity, the belief that finances are for experts, not for you. And postponement, the belief that someday, after you've made enough, you'll be free. Until those beliefs change, the techniques don't matter. You can read every personal finance book on the shelf. You can attend every seminar. You can hire the best advisor in the country. And underneath all of it, your nervous system is still sending the same mixed signals. I want more, but I don't deserve more. I want to invest, but I don't understand it. I'll start tomorrow when the timing is better. The techniques are the easy part. The beliefs are the hard part. And the beliefs come first. Once those are clean, once you've actually examined the quiet assumptions you carry about money, and you've replaced the ones that aren't serving you, then the techniques become actually useful. Then we can talk about the 5 keys to building wealth in the specific order Robbins lays them out. Because they do exist, they are simple, they are repeatable, and the first one is the foundation everything else stands on: how wealth actually gets made. If I asked you right now, how do you make more money? What would you say? Most people asked that question give an answer that sounds something like work harder, work longer hours, get a second job, take on more clients, pick up a side hustle, 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 hustle. Robbins says this is exactly the wrong answer. And it's the wrong answer in a way that traps an entire generation of well-meaning people in a life of grinding without ever getting ahead. Picture 2 people. They have the same job at the same company. They earn the same salary. One of them works 50 hours a week. The other works 60 hours a week. Who do you think is more likely to get the promotion? Most people would say the one who works 60 hours. Robbins says, and decades of corporate research backs this up, it's actually the one who works 50. Why? Because the one working 60 hours has organized her life around input. Hours worked, effort exerted, time spent at the desk. The one working 50 hours has organized her life around output, value produced, problem solved, results delivered. And the company, when it's deciding who to promote, isn't measuring hours, it's measuring impact. The single most important sentence in this part of the book is this: the key to making more money is to be worth more, not to work more. Not even to work smarter, exactly. To be worth more. To be more valuable. To produce more impact per hour than the person sitting next to you. And the moment you internalize this, your whole relationship to your career changes. The question stops being, how do I get a raise? The question becomes, how do I become a person who deserves one? Robbins tells a story about a radio salesperson in Phoenix, Arizona, who completely changed how she thought about her job. Most radio salespeople, when they go out to meet a potential client, do one thing. They try to sell radio time. That's the job. Sell the airtime. This woman did something different. She decided that her job wasn't to sell radio time. Her job was to make the business she was talking to more successful, period. Whatever that took. So when she heard, through her network, that a new shopping center was being built somewhere in the city, she would do something almost nobody in her industry did. She'd identify the vendors who'd be perfect for that shopping center, restaurants, retailers, services, and she'd call them up first, not to sell them radio time, to tell them about the opportunity. Hey, there's a new shopping center going up at this location. The developer is looking for tenants. I thought you might want to know. Then separately, she'd call the developer of the shopping center. Hi, I work in radio. I've been talking to vendors in your industry for years. I have a list of the best ones in this region. Would you like me to introduce you to a few of them? By the time she finally got around to actually selling radio time, every one of those clients was treating her like a partner, not a vendor, because she'd already given them something nobody else gave them: connection, opportunity, deals. Her income, doing essentially the same job everyone else in her office was doing, was multiple times what the average radio salesperson earned. Because she wasn't selling radio time, she was making the people around her more successful, and the income followed. Robbins gives another example, even simpler: a claims processor at a hospital. She was buried under paperwork like every other claims processor in the country, processing the same number of claims as everyone else, earning the same salary. Then one day, she sat down and asked herself a question: if I could redesign this job to be 5 times more efficient than it currently is, what would that look like? She came up with a plan. Then she went to her supervisor with a proposal. I think I can process 4 to 5 times more claims per day than I currently do. If I prove it over the next 3 months, will you increase my salary by 50%? Now 50%. That's a big ask. Most people hearing themselves form that sentence would never say it out loud. The fear would stop them. What if they say no? What if they fire me? What if they think I'm arrogant? But here's what Robbins says is true, and what almost every business owner I've ever read on this subject confirms. If somebody can genuinely do 5 times the work of a normal employee, paying them 50% more isn't an expense. It's the best investment the company can make. The supervisors said yes. The condition was she had to prove it over a sustained period. She did. Her income went up by 50%. Her job got more satisfying because she was operating at her actual capacity instead of being throttled by a system designed for average performers. And she stayed in that role for years longer than she otherwise would have. What both of these people did is what Robbins calls adding 10 times the value of what you're asking for. This is the formula. If you want to make more money where you are right now, don't ask for more money. Ask yourself how you could become so valuable that more money is the obvious response. If you want a $10,000 raise, figure out how to add $100,000 of value to your employer. If you want to charge double for your product, figure out how to make it worth 4 times more to your customer. The ratio is always 10 to 1. Add 10 times more value than you're asking for, and the money follows almost by itself. The reason most people can't seem to break through the income ceiling they've been stuck under for years is that they keep asking for more without becoming worth more. Now I want to be honest about something here. This advice can sound, on the surface, like it's putting all the responsibility on the worker and letting employers off the hook. There are companies that pay poorly no matter how much value you create. There are industries where the ceiling is structurally low. There are situations where the answer is to leave, not to add more value. I'm not pretending those don't exist, but here's the thing. Even in those situations, the muscle of asking, how can I become more valuable, is the muscle that ultimately gets you out. Because the day you leave, what you've built is your own skill, your own capacity, your own reputation, and those are portable. They follow you into the next job, the next company, the next venture. The employee mindset says, what will they pay me? The wealth mindset says, how valuable can I become? And the second one, applied for 10 years, will land you in a completely different life than the first one. But here is where most people stop reading the financial books, and where most financial books, frankly, lose the plot. Because earning more money is only the first of 5 keys, and the next 4, what you do with the money once it shows up, those are what separate the people who get wealthy from the people who get raises and stay broke. The napkin to the moon. Take an ordinary cloth napkin, the kind you'd find at a dinner party. It's about 1/32 of an inch thick, almost nothing. Now fold it in half. Now you have 2 layers, 1/16 of an inch. Fold it again, 1/8. Fold it again, 1/4. Fold it a 4th time, and you have a stack half an inch thick. Fold it a fifth time, and you have a stack 1 inch thick. Here's the question. If you could keep folding this napkin, really fold it, with no real-world physical limit, how many folds would it take before the thickness of the napkin reached the moon? The moon is 238,000 miles away. Most people ask this question, guess somewhere between 1,000 and 1,000,000. The math seems to demand a huge number. The starting thickness is so absurdly small and the distance is so absurdly large that intuition refuses to believe a small number could possibly bridge the gap. The answer is 39. 39 folds, that's it. Fold a napkin 39 times, and you have a stack that reaches the moon. And here's the part that's almost more incredible. If you fold it just 11 more times, 50 folds total, the stack you'd have is large enough to go to the moon and back 1,179 times. This isn't a math trick. This is the single most important thing nobody ever taught you about money. Robbins uses this example because it captures something the human mind genuinely struggles to process. We are linear creatures. When somebody says save more money, we instinctively imagine adding money to a pile. $10 plus $10 plus $10. After a year, you have a slightly bigger pile of dollars. But money invested properly doesn't behave like that. Money invested properly behaves like a folded napkin. It doesn't add, it multiplies. And the multiplying happens so slowly at first that almost everyone gives up before it kicks in. And then so dramatically at the end that almost everyone who stayed in is shocked by how it played out. So now we get to the second of Robbins's 5 keys to building wealth. And in some ways, it is the most important one. Earning more money was key number 1. Key number 2 is maintaining what you earn. Now this sounds obvious. Of course you have to keep the money you make. What's so hard about that? Turns out, almost everything. Robbins says one of the most consistent patterns he's seen, working with people across every income level imaginable, is this. The amount of money a person earns has almost no correlation with the amount of money they keep. He's worked with people earning $30,000 a year who saved 20% of it because they organized their lives around living below their means. And he's worked with people earning $2 million a year who were broke at the end of every month because their lifestyle had expanded to consume every dollar they brought in. The income changes, the pattern doesn't. You see the same thing in the most extreme cases. Lottery winners, professional athletes, movie stars, people who on paper won the financial lottery, and within 5 to 10 years, a huge percentage of them are broke. Sports Illustrated did a study years ago that found, within 5 years of retirement, 60% of NBA players are bankrupt. 60% of men who earned, in some cases, tens of millions of dollars over the course of their careers. How is that even possible? It's possible because the muscle of keeping money is a completely different muscle than the muscle of earning it. And one of them does not automatically train the other. So how do you build the muscle of keeping it? Robbins's answer is simple, almost embarrassingly simple, and almost nobody actually does it. Spend less than you earn and invest the difference. That's the whole formula. There's no asterisk, there's no clever workaround, there's no investment strategy that gets you around it. If you spend more than you earn, you will eventually be broke, no matter what your income is. If you spend less than you earn, and you put the difference into something that grows over time, you will eventually be wealthy, no matter what your income is. And here's the trick Robbins recommends, which sounds almost too simple to matter, but which has built more middle-class fortunes than any other single habit in the personal finance world. Pay yourself first, before the rent, before the groceries, before the discretionary spending, before anything else. Pick a percentage of your income. Robbins recommends at least 10%. And the moment that paycheck hits your account, that 10% moves automatically into an investment account before you ever see it, before you ever have a chance to spend it. Because here's what nearly everyone discovers when they actually do this. Whatever amount is left, that amount feels like the full paycheck. Your brain adjusts almost instantly. The 10% you never saw doesn't feel like a sacrifice. It feels like it was never there in the first place. And meanwhile, in the background, that 10% is starting to fold. 1 fold, 2 folds, 3 folds. Most people, in the first few years, look at the account and they're disappointed. They've been doing this for 2, 3, 4 years, and the account has barely grown beyond what they've put into it. They think, this isn't working, the math doesn't work, I'm putting in all this money and getting almost nothing back, and then they quit. They cancel the automatic transfer. They convince themselves it was a waste, and they go back to where they were. They give up on fold number 5 or fold number 10, never realizing that the magic doesn't happen until folds 25 through 40. Robbins says this is the single biggest reason ordinary people fail to build wealth. Not that they couldn't afford to invest, not that they didn't know how. They quit too early. They quit before compounding kicked in. They looked at the napkin 15 folds deep and concluded the moon was unreachable. Now I want to put some real numbers on this, because the math here is wild, and once you see it, you can't quite go back. Let's say you're 30 years old. You decide today, right now, to put $400 a month into a basic index fund. Just an ordinary fund tracking the stock market. Nothing exotic, nothing risky, the kind of thing you can set up in an afternoon. $400 a month for the next 35 years, until you're 65, at a historical average return of about 8% a year. Do you know what that account is worth at age 65? Just under $900,000. You put in, over 35 years, about $168,000 of your own money, and you ended up with nearly $900,000. The difference, over $700,000, is what compounding did for you while you were sleeping. Now what if you started 10 years later? Same numbers, $400 a month, 8% average return, just starting at 40 instead of 30. You'd think, okay, 10 fewer years, I'll have about 30% less, right? No, you'd have about $370,000, less than half, because you missed the years where compounding hits hardest. The last decade of a 35-year investment is where most of the wealth actually shows up. Cut the first decade off, and you lose more than you'd ever guess. And what if you waited until 50? About $140,000. You barely beat what you put in. The difference between starting at 30 and starting at 50 isn't a few $100,000. It's $700,000 on the exact same monthly contribution, same income, same fund, same effort. The only variable that changed was time. This is why Robbins says the most expensive financial mistake a person can make isn't a bad investment. It's a delayed start. Every year you wait to begin is a year compounding can't work for you. And once those years are gone, no amount of contribution makes them up. So that's key number 2. Maintain your wealth. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. Don't quit when it looks like nothing's happening. Key number 3 is closely related. Increase your wealth. Once compounding is working for you, reinvest the gains. Don't pull the dividends out. Don't take the interest as income. Roll it back in. Let the offspring of your dollars have offspring of their own. This is what Robbins calls reaching critical mass, the point where your investments generate enough income that you no longer need to work to support your life. For most people, critical mass is about 25 times your annual expenses. If you spend $40,000 a year, critical mass is about $1 million invested. If you spend $100,000, it's about $2.5 million. That's the number where, theoretically, the gains alone could cover your life forever. The faster you reach that number, the sooner the rest of your life becomes optional. Not retirement, necessarily, just optionality. Just the freedom to decide what to do because you want to, not because you have to. Key number 4, and this one Robbins spends less time on, but it's worth naming, is protect your wealth. Once you've started accumulating something, There are people in the world who will try to take it away from you. Frivolous lawsuits, bad business partners, identity theft, scams, fraud. The same systems that allowed you to build wealth in a relatively free society are the systems that allow other people to come after it. You don't need to be paranoid about this, but you do need to be basically aware. Insurance, asset protection, legal structures appropriate to your level of wealth. The more you accumulate, the more sophisticated this part has to get. But the basic rule is, what you build, you defend. And then there's key number 5. And this is the one almost every financial book I've ever read skips entirely. Enjoy your wealth. Robbins says, and this surprised me the first time I read it, that the people who actually accumulate significant wealth but never figure out how to enjoy it often end up more miserable than the people who never accumulated anything in the first place, because they spent 30 years denying themselves, telling themselves it would all be worth it at the end, and then arrived at the end with no idea how to live differently than they had been living during the climb. The discipline that builds wealth is not the same as the wisdom that enjoys it. Both have to be developed. If you only develop the first, you become wealthy and joyless. If you only develop the second, you become joyful and broke. The whole point is to develop both. This is why Robbins talks about the practice of tithing. Not necessarily 10% to a religious institution. The deeper idea, the practice of giving a portion of what you earn regularly to something that matters to you, long before you feel like you have enough to give it. Robbins says his own financial life started turning around the day he gave $20 to someone when he genuinely didn't have $20 to give. Not because the $20 made any practical difference, because giving it taught his brain something. It taught his brain that he was the kind of person who had enough to give. And the moment your brain believes you have enough, you start to make decisions consistent with abundance instead of scarcity. The point isn't the money. The point is the muscle. Generosity is a muscle. Enjoyment is a muscle. Receiving is a muscle. Build all three alongside the muscle of accumulation, and you end up with a life that's wealthy in the actual sense of the word, not just in the bank account. Money is a tool. It is not the destination. The destination is the life you build with the tool. And if you don't decide deliberately what that life looks like, the money will accumulate without you ever quite enjoying it. Which brings us naturally to the next question. Because if money is a tool and the destination is a life, what does that life actually look like? What are you using the tool to build? The answer, Robbins says, comes down to one of the most overlooked sections in the entire book. The section on what he calls your personal code of conduct. Be impeccable, your code of conduct. A young man, 27 years old, had achieved enormous success by every external measure of his time. He was brilliant. He was well-read. He was respected by people much older than him. By all accounts, he had the world by the tail. But one day, he realized something. He wasn't happy. He realized that, for all his success, many people quietly disliked him. They saw him as haughty, arrogant, overbearing, and he could feel more and more often that his life wasn't being directed by him. It was being directed by events, by moods, by the demands of the moment, by whoever happened to need something from him that day. So he sat down alone and he made a decision. He decided that he would no longer let the events of his life determine the kind of person he was. He would decide that in advance. He took out a journal and he wrote down 12 virtues, 12 specific states: temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity. 12 states he was committing to embody every single day, no matter what was happening around him. Next to each virtue, he drew a grid. Every day of the month was a small square, and the rule he set for himself was this: if at any point during a given day he violated one of those virtues, if he was impatient when he'd committed to temperance, if he was disorderly when he'd committed to order, he would put a small black dot in that day's square. His goal was simple: to go a full day, then a full week, then a full month with no black dots on the page, because then he would know that the man he intended to be and the man he actually was had become the same person. He was so proud of this system that he showed his journal to a friend. The friend looked at the 12 virtues, read them carefully, and then said, "You know, you should probably add one more." "Which one?" the young man asked. "Humility," the friend said, and Benjamin Franklin laughed and added the 13th virtue to his list. That young man went on to become one of the most consequential human beings in modern history. He helped invent a country. He helped invent multiple branches of science. He helped invent a vocabulary of self-improvement that we are still using 2.5 centuries later. And throughout his life, well into his 80s, he kept that journal, tracking 13 virtues, adding dots, trying every single day to be the man he had decided to be. So here's the question Robbins says is buried inside this story, and that most people never think to ask themselves: what are the values you say you live by? And what are the values you actually live by? Because almost everyone, asked what they value most, gives a similar list. They say things like family, honesty, integrity, hard work, kindness. Standard answers, the kind of thing you'd put on a business card. But Robbins says, and this is where it gets uncomfortable, almost nobody actually behaves day to day in accordance with the values they claim. Not because they're lying, because they've never made the values concrete enough to actually act on them. If you say you value family, but you never see them, do you really value family? Or do you just say you do? If you say you value honesty, but you tell white lies all day to avoid friction, do you really value honesty? Or do you just like the idea of yourself as an honest person? If you say you value health, but you've been postponing the gym for 3 years, do you really value health, or are you just embarrassed by the alternative? The values you actually live are visible in your calendar, your spending, and your habits. Everything else is wishful thinking. Robbins tells a story about his own moment of confrontation with this. He'd been writing the section on values for this book. He had a list of values that he was proud of: loving, contributing, honest, passionate, authentic. And one night, sitting in a hotel room in Milwaukee, between media obligations, he picked up Franklin's autobiography. He read the section about the 13 virtues, and it hit him almost like a punch. That he had values, yes, but he wasn't actually measuring whether he was living them. Not day by day, not hour by hour. He had the list, he had the philosophy, but he wasn't checking himself against it. So he did something different. He wrote down a new list. Not just values, but states. Specific emotional states he committed to embodying every single day, no matter what was happening. He wrote down things like friendly, happy, loving, outgoing, playful, powerful, generous, outrageous, passionate, fun. Not all the time, but at least once, fully, every single day. And he gave himself permission to check. The next day, he had a series of media obligations and a book signing scheduled at a shopping mall. When he got to the mall, the manager came up to him, distressed. "Mr. Robbins, we have a problem. The advertisement for your book signing was supposed to run in this morning's paper. It's running in tomorrow's paper instead. Nobody knows you're here." Now, before his Franklin moment the night before, Robbins might have reacted badly. Frustration, disappointment, annoyance. He'd flown across the country for this. He had 2 hours blocked out, and the venue had screwed up the publicity. But he just committed, the night before, to a list of states he was going to embody every day no matter what. And one of those states was outrageousness. Another was playfulness. Another was fun. So instead of complaining, he walked over to the empty book signing table, picked up a copy of his own book, and started reading it with audible, increasingly dramatic reactions. "Oh, wow, really? That's incredible." A woman walked by, saw a man having what looked like a religious experience with a paperback, stopped. What's so interesting? He started raving to her. This book is extraordinary. The author is brilliant. Listen to this part. Listen to this story. A few more people stopped. Then a few more. Within 20 minutes, 20 or 30 people were crowded around the table, listening to him talk passionately about how great this book was. Finally, after he'd built up the suspense as much as he could, he turned the book over, showed the back cover. Look familiar? And he sold out every copy on the table. He didn't change the situation. He changed who he was inside the situation. The mall hadn't promoted his book signing, so he became the promotion. This is what Robbins means by a code of conduct. It's not a list of moral rules. It's a list of who you've decided to be in advance, before any specific situation arrives, so that when the situation arrives, you don't have to figure out how to respond. You already know. Wayne Dyer once gave Robbins a metaphor for this that I haven't been able to forget since I first read it. He said, think of yourself as an orange. If you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Juice, but not just any juice. Orange juice, the kind that was already inside the orange. You don't get apple juice when you squeeze an orange. You get orange juice, because that's what was in there. And the same is true of you. When life squeezes you, when the stress hits, when the unexpected happens, when something goes wrong, what comes out of you is whatever was already inside. If patience was inside, patience comes out. If anger was inside, anger comes out. If love was inside, love comes out. The pressure doesn't put anything into you. The pressure only reveals what was already there, which means, and this is the part most people miss, your life is not really being shaped by what happens to you. It's being shaped by what was already inside you when those things happened. So the question worth sitting with before any of the rest of this matters is, what's inside you right now? Not when life is easy, when life is hard. What comes out when you get the bad news, the unfair criticism, the unexpected loss? Because whatever it is, that's the real you, in a way that the smooth sailing version of you isn't. And here's the good news. What's inside isn't fixed. You can change what's inside. That's what Franklin was doing with his 13 virtues. That's what John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach, was doing with what he called his 7-point creed, a list his father gave him when he was 12 years old that he lived by until the day he died. Be true to yourself. Make each day your masterpiece. Help others. Drink deeply from good books. Make friendship a fine art. Build a shelter against a rainy day. Pray for guidance and give thanks for your blessings every day. Wooden won 10 national championships across 12 years, the most dominant run in the history of American college sports. And every player who ever played for him said the same thing. Wooden's effectiveness as a coach had almost nothing to do with basketball strategy. It had to do with the 7 sentences his father gave him at age 12, which he passed on to every team he ever coached. What's your version? What's the list of who you've decided to be, regardless of what's happening around you? Most people have never made one. They live reactively. The day decides who they are, instead of the other way around. But once you make the list, once you actually sit down and write out the small handful of states you've committed to embodying every day, something quietly changes. You stop being a passenger in your own life. The events stop dictating your character. Your character starts dictating how you meet the events. And that, Robbins says, is the foundation under everything else. Because you can build wealth, you can master your time, you can structure your life perfectly. But if you don't know who you've decided to be inside all of it, the structure is just scaffolding around an empty room. Speaking of structure, and this is where most people's lives quietly fall apart, even when everything else seems to be working, there is one resource that affects every other resource. One thing that, more than money, more than energy, more than skill, determines whether your life feels rich or empty at the end of every single day. It's time. And almost everyone, Robbins says, is using it wrong in the same specific way. Master your time, master your life. Picture a man sitting at his kitchen table at the end of a long day. It's late, the kids are in bed, the dishes are mostly done. He has a notebook in front of him, and he's just finished doing what he does most nights, running through his to-do list. He's crossed off 12 things, 12. Almost every item. He answered every email. He returned the calls. He handled the small fire at work. He did the grocery run. He fixed the broken faucet. He helped his daughter with her homework. By every measure of productivity he was raised to believe in, this was a good day. He did the things. He checked the boxes. He was busy. So why does he feel, sitting at the table, like he wasted it? Robbins says this man, and there are millions of him, of women just like him, walking around in modern life right now, has run into one of the most quietly destructive confusions in modern life. He has mistaken urgency for importance, and the two are not the same thing. In fact, they're often opposites. Urgency is anything that demands your attention right now. The phone ringing, the email pinging, the text alert, the coworker stopping by your desk, the traffic light, the boss's last-minute request, the deadline approaching, anything where the meter is running. Importance is something different. Importance is whether the thing you're doing actually moves your life in a direction you want it to go, whether it builds something, whether it matters, whether, looking back on the year from the perspective of yourself 10 years from now, this thing you spent your time on would even be remembered. Most urgent things are not important. Most important things are not urgent. Think about your last week, the truly urgent things, the email that needed an answer in the next hour, the meeting that started in 15 minutes, the package that needed to be picked up before 5. Those things got handled, almost by force. Urgency creates its own gravity. You don't have to remember to do urgent things. They demand themselves. But what about the genuinely important things? The conversation with your spouse about how the two of you are actually doing. The phone call to the parent you haven't talked to in a month. The book you've been meaning to read for 2 years. The exercise habit you keep saying you'll start next week. The big project at work that would actually move the needle if you'd give it a few uninterrupted hours. Did any of those happen last week? For most people, the honest answer is no. Because the important things weren't urgent, and the urgent things weren't important. So the day filled up with the urgent stuff. The urgent stuff felt productive, and the important stuff quietly moved to next week, and the week after, and the week after that. This is how a decade disappears. Robbins says the single most useful frame he ever encountered on this came from a man named Stephen Covey, who was writing his own book around the same time Robbins was writing this one. Covey divided every activity in a person's life into 4 boxes. Box 1 is urgent and important. The fire alarm, the medical emergency, the deadline at midnight. You don't have a choice. These things demand action right now, and they matter. Box 2 is important, but not urgent. The exercise habit, the deep work, the relationships, the long-term thinking, the big personal projects. These are the things that, if you actually did them, would change your life. But because they're not screaming at you, you can postpone them indefinitely, and most people do. Box 3 is urgent but not important. Most emails, most phone calls, most interruptions, things that feel like they need your attention right now, but if you let them ring out, you'd realize almost nothing was actually lost. And box 4 is neither urgent nor important. Scrolling, mindless TV, the third hour of social media, the activities that are neither demanded of you nor moving you anywhere, but that somehow manage to consume hours of your week before you notice. Now here's the question. If I asked you on average where most of your time goes, which box would the honest answer be? For most modern people, it's box 3 and box 4. The urgent but unimportant, and the neither urgent nor important. The screen, the notification, the interruption, the scroll. And box 2 The important stuff that isn't urgent gets whatever's left, which is usually nothing. Robbins says throughout this part of the book that the people who actually build extraordinary lives are not the people who work the most hours. They are the people who spend the most of their hours in box 2. The important but not urgent, the deep work, the relationships, the investments in their body and mind and craft that compound over decades. So how do you actually do that? How do you stop letting urgency hijack your week? Robbins gives a small handful of principles, and I want to walk you through the most important ones. The first is, schedule the important things first. This is so simple it sounds dumb, but almost nobody actually does it. Most people, when they sit down to plan their week, plan around the things they have to do, the meetings, the deadlines, the errands, and then they hope that somewhere in the gaps, they'll find time for the things they actually wanted to do. They don't find time. There are no gaps. The week fills up with whatever lands in it. And the things they actually wanted to do, exercise, write the book, have the long talk with the partner, finally start the business, those don't have meetings attached to them, so they don't get scheduled, so they don't happen. The fix is the opposite. Schedule the important things first. Put them in the calendar before the urgent stuff has a chance to claim those hours. Block off Tuesday morning, 6 to 7 a.m. for exercise. Block off Sunday afternoon, 2 to 4 for the deep work. Block off Thursday night, 7 to 9 for time with the people you love. And then defend those blocks like they're meetings with the most important client you've ever had. Because in a way they are. The most important client you'll ever have is the person you're trying to become. The second principle is what Robbins calls distorting time. He says, more than once, that time itself is not a fixed thing. The clock measures time, but your experience of time has almost nothing to do with the clock. Have you ever spent 20 minutes in line at the DMV and felt like an hour had passed? And then spent 2 hours having dinner with someone you love and felt like 15 minutes had passed? Same amount of time on the clock. Wildly different experiences inside it. Robbins says this is actually a tool once you understand it. If you can deliberately put yourself into states of full presence, flow states, deep work, real connection with another human being, you can experience more life inside the same number of hours than people who are mostly half present, mostly half engaged, mostly waiting for the day to end. A fully present hour is worth a half present week. And the way to fully present hour is first removing the things that are pulling you out of them. The phone, the notifications, the background hum of social media, the constant low-grade attempt to be available to everyone all the time. You're not actually available to anyone if you're half available to everyone. The third principle is something Robbins doesn't quite name as a principle, but I think it's the most important of all. He says, in passing, most people spend their lives running from things, and they call it being busy. The honest version is, they're running from sitting still long enough to notice what their life actually is. Busy is sometimes a real thing, but busy is also sometimes a hiding place. Because if you stay busy enough, you don't have to face the question of whether what you're busy with actually matters. The schedule itself becomes the alibi. So a useful question to ask yourself, sometime in the next 24 hours, and this one might be uncomfortable, is this. If I cleared my calendar for a full week, and I sat with no agenda, no email, no meetings, no errands, no obligations, would I be at peace or would I be terrified? The answer to that question tells you something. Because the busyness most of us live inside isn't really busyness, it's avoidance in a costume. The fourth principle is short, but it's the one to write down. Robbins says repeatedly that the way you use your time is the way you use your life. There is no difference. Your life is just the sum of your days. Your days are just the sum of your hours. Your hours are just the sum of your minutes. The minutes look small, but they are the entire thing. You don't suddenly start using your life well in retirement. You use your life however you use the Tuesday you just finished. That Tuesday was a vote, and every other Tuesday, going back as far as you can remember, was also a vote. What have you been voting for? Robbins' whole point here is not that you should become more efficient. It's that efficiency is the wrong target. You can become extraordinarily efficient at completely meaningless activities. You can run a tight schedule full of garbage. The target isn't efficient. The target is meaningful. The target is, at the end of the week, to be able to look back and say, that mattered. That moved me toward who I want to be. Most weeks, for most people, don't pass that test. Not because the people are bad, because the urgent crowded out the important every single day, until the day became the week, became the month, became the year, became the life. The good news is the same as it's been throughout this entire book. It's all editable. You can change the way you use this Tuesday, then the next Tuesday, then the Tuesday after that. And 5 years from now, you'll have lived a Tuesday-shaped life that looks completely different from the one you'd be living if you didn't. Which brings us, finally, to the closing question of this entire video, and arguably the closing question of the entire book. Because everything we've talked about, emotional mastery, physical mastery, relationships, money, time, character, all of it raises one question that has nothing to do with technique. What is any of this for? What do you do in the end with the life this system gives you? Robbins ends the book with one of the most extraordinary stories I have ever read, and I want to tell it to you now, because the answer to that question in his hands is unforgettable. The $800 camera. What one person can do. In 1987, a 31-year-old man with $800 in his pocket drove across the Mexican border into a fishing town called Ensenada. His name was Sam Labude. He had a biology degree. He had no money beyond the $800. He had no organization backing him. He had no political connections, no influence, no media platform. He had a video camera he'd borrowed, and a single, almost ridiculous idea about what one person could do. For years, environmental groups in the United States had been trying to draw attention to something that was happening on the high seas in the Pacific Ocean. Commercial tuna fishing fleets, including the big American brands, the starkest of the world, the chicken of the sea, the bumblebee, were using a fishing method called purse seine netting. The method worked like this. The fleets would spot a pod of dolphins on the surface of the ocean. Tuna travel underneath dolphins, so if you found the dolphins, you found the tuna. The boats would then encircle the entire pod, dolphins and tuna together, with a massive net, drawing it tight at the bottom like a purse. The tuna would be caught, and the dolphins, who breathe air, would drown by the hundreds inside the net. The activists knew it was happening. They had numbers, they had reports, they had estimates, but they had no footage. And without footage, the public couldn't see it. And without seeing it, the public didn't care. Sam Labude decided he would get the footage. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have funding. He didn't have any kind of cover. What he had was an absurd idea that if he could just get hired onto a tuna boat as a crew member, somehow, anyhow, he could carry a camera, and over the course of his time on board, he could film what was actually happening out there. So he drove to Ensenada. He walked the docks for days. He asked, in broken Spanish, whether any of the tuna boats were hiring. Most weren't. Most thought he was crazy. Eventually, one captain, the captain of a boat called the Maria Luisa, needed a cook. The pay was about $100 a month, and he didn't ask too many questions. Labude took the job. He boarded the ship, and the ship sailed. For the next 4.5 months, Sam Labude lived on that boat. He cooked for the crew. He scrubbed pots. He kept his head down, and every time the boat encircled a pod of dolphins with the purse seine net, he carried his camera up onto the deck, and he filmed. What he saw over those months was almost beyond description. The boats would set a net around a pod of 50, 100, sometimes more dolphins. The dolphins, who are intelligent animals, would panic. They would try to swim out. They couldn't. The net would close. They would drown. Not all at once, but slowly, over hours, as the net was hauled in. Their bodies would be tossed overboard like trash. The tuna would be packed into the hold, and the boat would move on to find the next pod. In a single 5-hour stretch of fishing, Labuda watched and filmed the slaughter of more than 50 dolphins, many of them mothers with calves. The calves, separated from their mothers in the net, swam in frantic circles, then drowned with the rest. The crew didn't even consider this remarkable. It was a normal day's work. Labuda kept filming, and he kept his cover 4.5 months, 130 days, living among men who had done this their entire careers and saw nothing wrong with it, while secretly documenting it on tape. When the trip finally ended, he disembarked, took the tape back to the United States, and edited what he had into an 11-minute film. 11 minutes out of months of footage, the condensed, undeniable, on-camera reality of what the American tuna industry was actually doing in the Pacific Ocean. He took that 11-minute film and he started showing it to anyone who would watch, to Earth Island Institute, a small environmental group, to congressional staffers, to journalists, to television producers. The footage was so vivid, so unambiguous, so impossible to deny, that within weeks of being released, it was being shown on every major American news network. The reactions were immediate and overwhelming. Within a year, consumer boycotts of tuna had begun in the United States. School children stopped buying tuna sandwiches, restaurants stopped serving tuna, sales for the major brands collapsed. By April of 1990, less than 3 years after Sam Labuda signed on as a cook on the Maria Luisa, Starkist announced that it would no longer purchase tuna caught using methods that killed dolphins. Within 24 hours, Chicken of the Sea and Bumblebee announced the same policy. The Dolphin Safe label was born. Federal legislation followed. One man, $800, a borrowed video camera, and he ended an entire industry's relationship with one of the most intelligent species on the planet. Robbins ends his book on this story because, for him, it answers the question every self-improvement book has to eventually answer. What is any of this for? The answer Robbins keeps coming back to is the same answer he found driving down a freeway one night, years before he was successful. The 6 words he had to pull over and write down. The secret to living is giving. All the personal growth, all the emotional mastery, all the financial security, all the time management, it all eventually has to point somewhere outside yourself, because if it doesn't, it goes nowhere. You become a more polished, more disciplined, more wealthy version of someone who is only ever working on themselves. And that life, no matter how good it looks on paper, ends up feeling hollow when you arrive at the end of it. But the moment a piece of your life, even a small piece, exists for someone else, the whole calculation changes. The same time spent feels different. The same effort feels different. The same money feels different. Because now it's pointed somewhere beyond you. Robbins tells another story, much shorter than the Labuda story, but in some ways even more powerful. It's about a young Albanian nun who had been teaching in a comfortable Catholic school in India for 20 years, when one day she was walking home through Calcutta, and she saw on the side of the road a woman lying in the dirt, dying. The woman's body had been partially eaten by rats and ants. People were walking past her, hundreds of people, walking past because that's what you did in Calcutta in 1948. The young nun didn't walk past. She stopped. She picked the woman up. She carried her to a nearby hospital. The hospital refused to admit her because she was dying anyway, and there was no room. The nun carried her to another hospital. Same answer, to a third, to a fourth. Eventually, the nun simply sat down on the side of the road, holding the woman in her arms, and she stayed there holding her while the woman died. That moment, sitting on a Calcutta sidewalk, holding a dying stranger, was the moment Mother Teresa decided what her life was going to be. She would later say that everything she ever did afterward the home for the dying she founded in Calcutta, the International Order of Nuns, the Nobel Peace Prize, the decades of work that touched millions, all of it came out of that one afternoon. One stranger, one sidewalk, one decision to stop walking past. What Sam Labude and Mother Teresa share is something almost nobody talks about, but that Robbins says is the actual organizing principle of every life that ends up mattering. It's not that they were exceptional people. They weren't at the moment they made their decisions. Sam Labude was an unemployed biology graduate with $800. Mother Teresa was a 38-year-old schoolteacher in a comfortable convent. Neither one had any special qualification for what they ended up doing. What they had was a moment where they stopped walking past. And Robbins says, and this is the line more than any other line in this entire book that I want you to actually carry with you. Most people are waiting for a sign that their life is supposed to matter. They are waiting for permission. They are waiting for the right credentials, the right resources, the right moment. No sign is coming. No permission is coming. No moment is coming. The sign is the thing in front of you right now that you keep walking past. Maybe it's a cause, maybe it's a person, maybe it's a contribution you've been quietly thinking about making for years that you keep telling yourself you'll get to once you have more time, more money, more credentials. You don't need more of any of those things. Sam Labude had $800. Mother Teresa had a teacher's salary. They had less than you have by almost every measure. What they had that you might not yet have is the decision to stop walking past. So the closing question before we end this video is the simplest one in the entire book. What are you walking past? Key takeaways. Before we close, I want to slow down for a moment and tie all of this together. Because in this video, and in the one that came before it, we've covered the complete arc of Tony Robbins' system, and the pieces fit together more elegantly than they may have seemed to as we went along section by section. Robbins' central claim across the entire book is that a human life is not a thing that happens to you. It is a thing you build quietly, deliberately, through a small number of choices, repeated over many years, that compound the same way money does. Most people never become the architects of their own lives because nobody told them they could. They went through life as passengers, reacting to whatever showed up, hoping the next thing that showed up would be better than the last one. And one day they looked up, and the life they were living wasn't one they had chosen. It was one that had been assembled around them by default while they were busy. Robbins' whole project in this book is to take you out of that passenger seat and put you in the driver's seat. The catch is, the driver's seat requires you to actually drive. Let me give you the system in its simplest form. First, money is downstream of beliefs. Until you've examined the quiet assumptions you carry about wealth, whether you secretly believe it's a zero-sum game, whether you've ever made peace with the idea that you might deserve it, whether you've been waiting for someday when you'll feel ready, the techniques don't matter. The same person with the same income can spend a lifetime broke or build a quiet fortune. The difference isn't the income. The difference is what's running underneath it. Second, wealth is created, not extracted. The most successful people of our time aren't people who took from others. They are people who added something. Sand became silicon. Information became search engines. Garages became companies. The pie isn't fixed, and the people who eventually have the largest slice of it are the people who made the pie bigger. Third, the path to making more money is to become worth more. Not to work more hours, to produce more value per hour than the person sitting next to you. The radio salesperson in Phoenix didn't sell radio time. She made other businesses successful, and the income followed. The hospital claims processor didn't ask for a raise. She demonstrated she was worth one. The formula is 10-to-1. Add 10 times more value than you're asking for, and the money follows almost by itself. Fourth, compounding is the most powerful financial force on earth. and almost no one waits long enough for it to work. Fold a napkin 39 times, it reaches the moon. Save $400 a month from age 30 to age 65. You have nearly $900,000. Start at 50 instead. You barely beat what you put in. The single most expensive financial mistake isn't a bad investment. It's a delayed start. The years you wait can never be recovered. Fifth, the wealth equation has 5 parts in order: earn, maintain, increase, protect, enjoy. Most people never get past the first one. Many of the ones who do never figure out how to enjoy it. The whole point of the system isn't the accumulation, it's the life the accumulation lets you build. Sixth, underneath every dollar you spend and every hour you spend is a code of conduct. A set of values you've either chosen deliberately or absorbed by default. Benjamin Franklin made his list at 27 and lived by it for 60 years. John Wooden's father gave him a 7-point creed at age 12 that shaped one of the most dominant coaching careers in history. The orange, when squeezed, gives you whatever was already inside. What's inside you when life squeezes you is the only real measure of who you are. Seventh, time is not what the clock measures. It's what you experience while the clock is running. A fully present hour is worth a half-present week, and the way most modern people use their time, urgent but unimportant tasks, half-present screens, busyness as a hiding place, is not really living. It is the simulation of living. Schedule the important things first. Defend those hours. Stop letting urgency hijack your week, because the way you use this Tuesday is the way you're using your life. And eighth, the whole point of the system, the reason any of this matters, is what you do with the life it gives you. The most extraordinary human lives in history, the ones we still talk about decades and centuries later, almost all share one feature. At some point, the person decided that their life was going to be about something larger than themselves. Sam Labudi took $800 and a borrowed camera and ended an industry's relationship with dolphins. Mother Teresa sat down on a Calcutta sidewalk and held a dying stranger. Neither one had special credentials. Neither one had permission. They had the decision to stop walking past. You don't need more credentials. You don't need more permission. You don't need more time. The opportunity is the thing in front of you right now that you keep walking past. Robbins has a line toward the very end of the book that I want to leave you with before we close. He says, "Destiny is not the absence of choice. Destiny is the choice you keep making every day, in small ways, without realizing. The destiny you're heading toward right now is being built by the choices you're making this week. Not the big ones, the small ones. What you read, what you eat, who you spend time with, what questions you ask yourself when you wake up, what you decide to ignore, and what you decide to face. The good news is that none of it is fixed. The choices you've been making by default for years can become choices you make deliberately, starting tomorrow morning. And 5 years from now, the life that compounds from those new choices will not look anything like the life you would have built on autopilot. The only question is whether you're going to start." Closing. Tony Robbins published this book in 1991. He was 31 years old. He had spent the years just before writing it sleeping in a tiny one-room apartment in Venice, California, washing his dishes in the bathtub, paying his bills by giving small seminars he'd hustled up at hotels and conference rooms. In other words, he wasn't writing this book from the top of a mountain looking down. He was writing it from a few years past the bottom, looking back. He had lived everything in this book. He had been broke, and he had built wealth. He had been emotionally lost, and he had found a system. He had been physically out of shape, and he had rebuilt his body. He had been in a struggling relationship, and he had figured out, with his wife Becky, what most couples never figure out. He wasn't writing as someone who had been born to greatness. He was writing as someone who had built it painfully, one piece at a time, and was trying to give the blueprint to anyone who wanted it. More than 30 years have passed since then. Trends have come and gone. The self-help industry has reinvented itself a dozen times, and this book is still on the shelf in nearly every coach, therapist, and high performer's library. The reason isn't that Robbins is louder or more famous or more original than anyone else who came after him. The reason is that what he laid out in this book is the actual operating system, not how we wish we changed, how we actually change from the inside out, one choice at a time. You now have the whole map. Pain and pleasure, emotions as signals, the states you choose to live in, the words you let leave your mouth, the questions you ask yourself before you even know you're asking, the body you're standing in, the people you've chosen, money, time, your code of conduct, and the contribution you've been quietly walking past. All of it is yours. All of it is editable. All of it is one decision away from being something else, but none of it changes by itself. You have to decide. So before we end, I want to leave you with a different question than the one I left you with at the end of part 1. Part 1 ended with, what are you waiting for? This one I want to make sharper. What is the one specific thing, not in general, the one specific thing that you have been walking past for too long? Maybe it's a financial decision you've been postponing for 5 years because you keep telling yourself you don't understand it well enough. Maybe it's a conversation with a parent who isn't going to be around forever. Maybe it's a contribution you've been quietly drawn toward for half your adult life that you keep telling yourself you'll start once you have more time, more money, more permission. Maybe it's a body you've been ignoring that's been quietly asking for your attention. Whatever it is, and you know what it is, even if you've never named it out loud, that thing is the sign, the one you've been waiting for. It's been in front of you the whole time. You just kept walking past it because you were busy with the urgent stuff. Don't wait another week. If something in either of these videos landed somewhere honest in you, if you can feel right now the thing the discomfort is pointing at, that landing wasn't an accident. That was your own nervous system flagging the part of your life that's been quietly asking for attention, the part of you that already knows what to do, waiting for the rest of you to catch up. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to overhaul your life this weekend. Just pick the one thing, just one, and do something small about it today. Not tomorrow, not when things calm down. Today. If this 2-part series gave you something, the book itself goes much deeper than I was able to cover. Awaken the Giant Within is one of the few self-help books I'd actually recommend listening to twice. Once to take in the framework, and once 6 months later to see what you've actually applied. I've linked it below in both Amazon and Audible. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, the inner world half of the system, covering emotional mastery, physical mastery, and relationships, go watch it next. The 2 parts work together. Part 1 is where the foundation of all of this gets laid, and a lot of what we covered today rests on it. And if this is the kind of work you want more of, long-form, careful book deep dives, the kind nobody else on YouTube seems to be making anymore, subscribe. There's a new one every week. Each one takes me about 40 hours to produce because I'm trying to do the book's actual justice. Instead of giving you a summary you could find anywhere, drop a comment below and tell me what your one specific thing is. The thing you've been walking past. You don't have to share details if you don't want to. Just naming it, even vaguely, is the start of doing something about it. And sometimes reading other people's answers is the thing that finally makes you take your own seriously. Take care of yourself. Take care of your people. Stop walking past the thing that's been waiting for you. And I'll see you in the next one.